Hi, everybody. Good afternoon and evening to you, depending on where you are. My name is Allison Bainbridge. I have the fortune of hosting this event to discuss the powerful and emotional memoir, Easy Beauty. Easy Beauty is Chloé Cooper Jones' bold, revealing account of moving through the world in a body that looks different than most. Chloé learned early on to factor pain calculations into every plan, every situation. Born with a rare congenital condition called sacral agenesis, which affects both her stature and gait. Her pain is physical, but there is also the pain of being judged and pitied for her appearance, of being dismissed as less than. The way she has been seen or not seen has informed her lens on the world her entire life. And then she is given the gift of motherhood. The book is crafted from a collage of experiences from childhood to the present day. This is a unique memoir, as its passion and humor have the power to make you see the world very differently. Your place in it with new eyes. One of the reviews that I read describes the book in this way. The chapters melt and flow into one another, linked by meditative musings on philosophical theories of beauty that are sacred throughout. I just love the way it described that. And then throw in a great sense of humor on top of it. Chloé is a philosophy professor and award-winning journalist who was a finalist for the 2020 Pulitzer Prize in feature writing. Her work has appeared in publications including GQ, The Verge, Vice, Book Forum, many others, and has also been selected for the Best American Travel Writing and the Best American Sports Writing. She lives in Brooklyn, New York. And we are so fortunate to have author Jessamine Chan discussing Chloé's book with her today. Jassmine's short stories have appeared in several publications. A former reviews editor at Publishers Weekly, she holds an MFA from Columbia University's School of, sorry, it got cut out. Her work has received support from the Elizabeth George Foundation, the Breadloaf Writers Conference, among many other prestigious foundations and organizations. She lives in Philadelphia, actually in Chicago, with her husband and daughter. Her most recent book is A School for Good Mothers. Now, Jessamine and Chloé, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me to join your tour, Chloé. I'm so thrilled to be talking about your book. I feel like I've done a Chloé Cooper Jones seminar for the last few days in preparation for this conversation, and I can say that it's such a pleasure to read your work. And I was telling my husband that I would read anything you write about any subject, including about tennis, which I have generally no interest in, but you're the kind of writer who, like, once someone becomes a fan, they'll follow you anywhere. And I'm such a fan of your book, and I think you're a genius. And I think a lot of my friends are geniuses, but I think you are actually a genius. And I really just want to say I'm very charmed by the way we met, because we were both doing the Simon & Schuster Selects tour. And I started following you on Instagram. And then at some point you posted a hilarious photo that was like a still image of you doing the author promo video, like the little snippet we had to do. And your caption was author video or hostage video. And I thought, this person is on my wavelength. I should say hello. Like, it was just like exactly understanding the weirdness of the situation. So I feel very grateful for the online tour leading to a real friendship. So this is a book that really makes me want to write again. And also it feels like a book that I'm rereading and studying all my life and passing down to my daughter and recommending to all my friends. So for readers who haven't read the book yet, because I know it's only been out for a few days, can you start by telling us what the book is about?
Yes, but I just have to say a few things first, if that's all right. I mean, first of all, thank you that's just what an incredible introduction, and it means so much to me from anyone, but especially from you. I mean, your book, you're talking about how we met on the beginning of the press tour. And for me, my experience of it was I read your book, School for Good Mothers, and immediately felt so seen and understood. And I was like, how do I make this person my new best friend? I was like, so I think it's like an incredible thing when you encounter someone's work, and this is something actually that I think a lot in the book, or think about a lot in the book, and I think is one of the great powers of any sort of experience of beauty or art, is that every once in a while you come across a little thing, whether it's you're walking around a museum and you see a painting and you go, okay, that's a mind I understand suddenly. Like that painting was made by another human who sees things in a way that I see things and have never been able to maybe put into words. Or a little bit of music where you go, that music is speaking to something inside me. And then I think also when I read certain people's writing, I just immediately feel like that's my person. And in the book, I talk about this philosopher Plotinus, who believed that the soul had a capacity for beauty, just like the eyes have a capacity for perception. And he thought that when we had those moments of connection, which he calls kinship, that it's actually seeing a little corner of our soul made tangible in the world. And that's the way I felt reading your writing. And I also think that the way that we could talk about this sort of strangeness of the book tour or the book pre-publication process, which is a complex process in that you're so grateful. And this is a dream come true for both of us. Both of us are, these are our debut books, but at the same time, it's like, it's scary and awkward. And I don't know, I just felt like I was doing everything wrong and talking about the book wrong. But watching you go through this mega tour with like just unbelievable pressure and publicity and success, and you've just handled it with such grace. It's been like such a model to me. For those who are watching, like, if you don't have Jasmine's book, you should buy it because it's good. But beyond that, you should buy it because like the way in which you supported other writers while you've been going through, like, Jasmine was like texting me saying like, should I send you some masks? Like I have some extra masks. And I'm like, no, like you're the busiest human on the planet. Like you don't have to mail me masks that I can get like at CVS, and wrote me like handwritten letters and of gratitude. And like, I just like don't know how you're doing it. I know I'm not supposed to ask you these questions, but can you just tell me one little thing about your best advice for doing this tour well with grace and gratitude, even while the actual feelings that one is having are so conflicted or so many different feelings?
I'll answer this, but then I'm going to make you talk about you for the rest of the hour.
Okay.
But I will just also add, I also appreciate that we're both from the Midwest, and I feel like we approached our new friendship with a similar Midwestern earnestness. Like, I want to be your friend, and I want to be your friend. I love your book. No, I love your book. And so it was, I feel like we were trying to out-compliment each other sometimes, and that was very special to me. I think clearly you're doing great. I mean, I just listened to one of your podcasts this weekend. You are so naturally good at this. I think, it does feel kind of overwhelming, but I mean, I think the fact that we both have kids who probably do not care about any of it is probably a grounding force. I mean, I spend a lot of time with someone who just does not care about any of the like Instagram posts or new blurbs or new reviews. So I think that probably has a good effect on the soul.
Totally. My 10-year-old was with me, Wolfgang. He was with me for my Brooklyn launch. And the woman who did my Brooklyn launch said to me, does Wolfgang maybe want to ask the first question in the Q&A to like, warm up the audience or something? And so I said, well, I'll ask him. And I said, Wolf, like, you're going to be in the front row for Mommy's special book launch. Like, do you want to ask me a question? And he was like, I lived with you while you wrote this book. Like, I know everything. Why would I ask you a question? I was like, okay. Like, it is like such an incredibly grounding force. And then my mother came with me, who's also very Midwestern, and she came with me to the Portland launch, and she was like, stop playing with your hair. And then when people were coming up to have me sign books, she's like, you're taking too long, like people are waiting. And so I have like these extremely grounding forces on either end of my life cycle, and it's been really helpful for sure.
Well, my parents refer to you as my friend who won the Pulitzer Prize. Like your friend Chloe, who won the Pulitzer Prize, gave they like each thing, they've just given you a promotion. But for folks tuning in, I'm going to ask, I'm going to make you talk about yourself. So what would you say the book is about? And related to that, I feel like there's an intellectual project for the book and an emotional project for it.
Yeah. So the book begins with me sitting in a bar with two friends of mine who are in my philosophy PhD program, and the discussion about whether or not my life is worth living comes up because of my disability. And this is not a new argument. Anybody who knows something about, disability history knows that the worthiness or the inherent value of the disabled life has been debated in a lot of spheres, including the medical sphere, but also in ethics. The philosopher Peter Singer is probably the most famous living philosopher, and he has articulated arguments for many years about the ways in which disability could actually limit your autonomy or your personhood altogether. So the fact that these men were arguing about my life, that wasn't new to me. But what was new to me was the fact that I recognized that I was retreating from the conversation rather than engaging with it and trying to defend the value of my life. I went into this sort of dissociative space in my mind, which I call the neutral room. And I just wanted to wait for the conversation to be over. And I realized that I had been doing that for my whole life. And that if I kept doing that, then I was in many ways complicit in these men's bad thoughts, or one of them in their bad beliefs about the lesser value of the disabled life. So that sort of began this project. And I think it also happened at the same time alongside with my son turning about 4, or he was almost 5. And as you're learning with Lulu, like these kids are these little mirrors, and Wolfgang was observing and like absorbing all of my moods and my behavior and my anxieties and my belief that strangers held the power to hurt me. And so I had like a cynicism towards strangers that came before even meeting them. And so that in and of itself was sort of a dehumanizing act on my part. And I saw him as he was starting pre-K and kindergarten for the first time, reflecting all that behavior back to me. So those two events together sparked this sort of quest to figure out how to form a language to talk about disability, how to form a language to think about my role in the world, how to get some peace in terms of thinking about how I'm seen and how I see other people, and to also get a handle on the ways in which I could use this sort of retreat, which in many ways can be a very powerful thing, to retreat or to find a place of agency within yourself that's a little bit separated from pain or from the present. But there's always this threshold, right, where the power of that retreat, if it crosses a certain threshold, can become about absenting yourself from things that are difficult but necessary, like having real conversations with people about disability and about my life being extremely worthy. And so those two things happened, and it began as a very personal project to just try to shift something in myself in order to be a better parent and to model a life for Wolfgang that was about being in a world of others and learning how to really genuinely engage with others rather than put my own preconceived notions on them. So that's like, I think the emotional sort of project of it.
So a lot of the book is about seeing and being seen. And I received some early praise about the book, specifically from my agent, Meredith Keppel-Simonoff, who I know we're both big fans of her. And she talked about how the book really makes you see the world differently. And I thought like, well, that is a big promise to live up to, but then it actually does. And I don't know that I've encountered too many books that like actually like change one's consciousness in that way. And I just wanted to see what has it been like meeting people on tour? Because now you are being seen, and you have to put yourself out there in not just through your words, but also like you had this amazing quote, I think in an interview, you referred to the whole complex quagmire of doing identity in public. So how you've been doing this for about a week now, how has it been going?
I mean, it's been incredible. It's been really incredible. People have been really kind, and I've met a lot of people who have felt like they're being seen, that I'm talking about their lives and their bodies. And it is really important to me that this book feels like it's for everyone, and that the questions that I'm asking are not, maybe are going to resonate, very much for people who have disabilities or who live with chronic pain, or maybe just people who are trying to shift something in themselves. But I really hope that it feels like a book for everyone. And this is sort of going back to something you said before you asked your question, but that's a huge compliment from Meredith. I'm so glad. And this idea of reshifting how you can see is really crucial to like the intellectual project of the book. So I just explained, like the personal project was I needed to change something in myself. And I wanted to think about how people did that. So the thing, because I studied philosophy for so long and taught philosophy for so long, I was looking at philosophical theories, and the person that I was very inspired by, who in many ways is her concept is the backbone of this whole book, is the philosopher Iris Murdoch, who believed that the experience of beauty could shift our behavior. So one of her sort of basic concepts is the way we see is informed by the narratives we know. And so the narratives will actually shape the way you can perceive anything. And then how we perceive shapes our behavior, right? Like, so how we see informs how we act. So she thought, if you want to shift people's behavior, you have to shift their concepts of a thing. So she thought one of the ways you can shift your concepts of a thing is by putting yourself out into the world and experiencing beauty. And by beauty, we mean beauty of other people, but the beauty you might see in a museum, the beauty in the natural world, the beauty of conversation or friendship or love. Beauty, of course, it is a term that encompasses so many different things, right? I call my dog beautiful. I call food beautiful. So it's a big, big idea. But she says, when you tune your eye to beauty, you necessarily have to leave your own, and these are her words, your own fat, relentless ego, the part of you that spends all your time like jammed in your own head, worried about your own life and your own problems. And the experience of beauty necessarily takes you out of that. And it either puts you into a world of other people or what other minds can make. Like when you look at at a book like yours, or a Bernini sculpture, a Verdi concert, or puts you in tune with the natural world. And then when you return to yourself, you come back with a little bit more distance and perspective that allows you to shift your perceptions. And then by shifting your perceptions, shift your behavior. So the explicit project of the book for me is to see if I can change something about myself by getting out of my own hurt, somewhat melodramatic, wounded, self-absorbed mental state, and push myself out, both literally and physically and emotionally, into the world and into experiences with beauty, to see if I can, come out of that a slightly more coherent, better person with better concepts. But the implicit project of the book is that I want to shift every reader's perception of disability. And I'm not going to do it or Iris Murdoch doesn't think I'm going to do it by saying like, you're wrong and all your ideas are bad. And, it's like, no, I'm going to try to do it by asking you to spend 288 pages in the mind of and very close to a disabled life, and to present that disabled life as a very full, real, human, complex life, not a good one, not necessarily an inspirational one, not one where I'm doing much of anything well or correctly, but a very real one, and hopefully one that feels full and rich, so that you don't necessarily come out of this book liking me or even rooting for me, but it might be very hard to deny that my life is lesser or less complex or less worthy than anybody else's. So if I can shift a concept for some readers about what a disabled life is, then I can shift says Murdoch, the way you see. And if I can shift the way you see, then I can shift your behavior, and not only toward me and not only toward other people in the disability community, but also hopefully toward yourself, because disability is going to be a part. I mean, if we live long enough, if we're lucky enough to live a long life, we're going to encounter our own capacities changing and decreasing, and we're going to struggle with our bodies, as we all do. Like, we're all in this very complex and influx relationship to our bodies. You get ill, that's disability, you know? So if I can help people in any way, just like an inch, sort of shift that concept, then maybe there's not just more humanizing that I will enjoy, but also maybe that's a gift for yourself when you encounter, if you're not disabled now, when you encounter disability in your own life, which inevitably you will.
Related to that topic, I think I was startled to read this in one of your interviews, because I'm meeting you on the occasion of your first book, which is partly about the subject of disability. I read that the Believer essay from a few years ago was your first time writing about this subject, and that you didn't start writing about disability until your 30s. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your reluctance or resistance to writing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't want to ever talk about disability. I never talked to my friends about it. I never talked to my husband about it. I talked to my mother as little as humanly possible about it. I certainly didn't want to write about it. And I didn't want to write about it for a lot of reasons. One was that everyone assumed I would. So it was like it felt reductive, especially when I was in my PhD programs. People would kind of see me and go, oh, so you're doing disability theory, or oh, you're doing social identity or social political philosophy. And those were great subjects that I should have absolutely done, but it felt so reductive to just be seen and immediately isolated down to one visual element. And then that's all the thoughts that someone had about me. So I was resistant to that because it felt, it just felt reductive. But also I had a bad idea. This was my bad concept that I needed to shift, a la Murdoch, which was that I really thought my body was this burden between myself and anyone else, and that I couldn't really be like seen, like my real me couldn't be seen until people unsaw my body. So I kept waiting, and I would do things like sort of, try to make people laugh or try to do a sleight of hand, like talk about any other subject or turn everything back on them so that eventually they'd sort of relax. And then people would say things to me like, I spent some time with you and like, I don't even notice your disability. I don't even think of you. I would never describe you as disabled. And at that time I would think, oh, phew, good. Now we can really talk. Now you can see like the real me. And of course, the problem with that is that there is no real me without my body. Like, this is a very obvious thought that I tried to ignore for many, many, many years, like till I was 30, like a really long time. But there is no real me without my body. Like, my body and myself are deeply, complexly, opaquely, but importantly connected. And it was also, of course, an act of self-erasure to want to pretend like my disability didn't exist, or that I wasn't in pain, or that I needed to hide and not communicate about this really essential part of myself and my day-to-day life. And when I finally started writing about disability, which was prompted by, as I said before, just this need to be a better parent, and not to be this sort of split, parent who's sort of existing on two different planes. Then I started talking about my disability. I started writing about it. I started researching it. I learned my history. I reached out to a community that I belong to. I learned about the legal rights that I enjoy because of activists who have really worked hard to put disability issues in the forefront. And by doing all of those things, this sort of magical thing happens where I started being a more authentic person, a more honest person, and a more open person. And when you do that, again, this is an obvious thing that everyone knows, but took a long time for me to figure out. When you behave that way, you give other people a permission to be a little more honest or a little more authentic themselves. And then this amazing thing happens, which is then you're actually connecting. And that's what I always wanted. And for many years, I was my own blockade. It wasn't my body. It was my bad concepts that was the blockade between that thing happening. And so one of the sort of amazing things that's come out of this process is I'm literally closer to every single person in my life, including my family. And it just took writing about this very obvious thing, which was my physical self.
So this is a sort of related question, but also related to something from like 15 minutes ago now. But we're talking about like becoming more public and like having to promote our books and speak to a lot more people now. One of the things that I really related to in the book was everything you wrote about taking up space and not wanting to take up space. And you wrote that I'd be further in life had I not so fully absorbed the lesson that my social value depended on my being compromising, deferential, and small. And that really spoke to me because it's, I think, explained like probably the last 43 years of my life. But then in contrast, you write about a film director you met in New York, and you say she understands the space she takes up in a room and occupies it unapologetically. She speaks without ambivalence about her ideas and intentions. So publishing a book requires getting comfortable taking up space. And can you talk about what that experience has been like for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think probably there's just so many people that like you're saying, like that struggle with that idea of how much space they're supposed to take up. And then I think those things can be complicated by being Midwestern is one, being female, being disabled, being Asian, being, told that you're, or having people reflect back to you their sort of ideas of your limitations, and then feeling like, I don't know, like well, here's the thing. It's like, I think you get taught where your ceiling is. Mm-hmm. And you get taught that in a lot of different ways. You get taught that by your parents, you get taught that by culture. But you also get taught that by, like a thing I was saying before, like the way we see a person for the first time is informed by our concepts. And the first thought we have about them is informed by just simply the narrative we're told about them. And if they're a stranger who you're never going to see again, then you don't have like a second or third or fourth more complex thought. So if I'm walking around in Brooklyn and encountering lots and lots of strangers, as I do, then the thing that comes in their eyes when they look at me first is often informed by this concept. So what they're seeing is a small disabled woman who walks sort of, very precariously. And a lot of what I've seen my whole life is like a worry about me or an assumption that I'm struggling or having a hard time. And that's the mirror that keeps, just millions and millions of eyes of strangers kind of like reflecting that back to me. Now, the people who spend a lot of time with me, of course, have other things to reflect back, but at subways and grocery stores, that's the thing. And even if I can intellectualize that that's not who I am, I think it's really hard to not internalize some of that and to feel as though maybe I am struggling, or maybe I can't really do this thing, or maybe this space isn't for me. Maybe I shouldn't enter that space, or maybe I should apologize for being ambitious or for wanting my ceiling to go up. Like there's something I'm taught that I should feel a sort of embarrassment about that. And I think an interesting way that it's manifesting, and I think you and I've talked about this a little bit, is like every time I post on social media that I'm doing an event, I feel like I need to apologize. Like I want to keep writing tweets that are like, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry to everyone.
I'm so sorry for taking your attention. I'm so sorry for using up one of your squares.
I keep being like, you must be so sick of me. Like, this is so, or like doing Q&As. I'm just like, oh, nobody, it's okay. We can all go home now. Like you can, like people will come to my event specifically. I'm like, I'm so sorry that I've taken up your time. Like, it's such a hard thing to unlearn. And I personally don't feel like I know where that threshold is, because the other side of this constant feeling of apology tour is the possibility that people might think that I'm not excited or grateful or present. And so I don't know, it's just like a very difficult thing to navigate. But so part of the answer is I don't know how to do it. I'm still working on it. But when I saw this director, she just took up her space, and no more, no less. She just talked about her work in a way that was confident and true, and allowed herself the ability to claim this particular corner that she had earned and worked for. And I think that the more times that we see, especially women, model that, the better I will be at getting close to that myself. And I think it was just an incredibly instructive thing to see this woman who was an artist and was brilliant and wasn't bragging and wasn't being, arrogant, but was just like, yeah, I'll tell you about my brain and my ideas and this thing I made, and no apologies. And that's kind of a radical idea for someone like me a little bit.
No, when I read the description of her, I thought, oh, this is a model for living.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say a reminder to the audience to feel free to ask questions in the chat. I know we have one already, and I think I'm gonna break up my questions now. And so Jane Geringer asks, she's interested in your perception of the similarities and differences between physical and mental disabilities.
That's a great question. I mean, I think that they're really different. I mean, one of the difficult things about disability is that term is this massive umbrella in which so many different people can fit and should consider themselves under that umbrella. Disability is a really wildly inclusive term for a lot of good reasons, I think. And the ways in which, physical or hidden, the difference between a hidden disability, one that doesn't immediately manifest visually, and a more physical disability like mine is really interesting. So one privilege that I really enjoy as a very visibly physically disabled person is that people don't question whether or not I have a disability. They can just see it. And one of the sort of social things that comes from disability is a suspicion around people, and a resistance to believe them that they're in pain, or that they're ill, or that they have ailments, or that they're depressed. And there's still a lot of social stigma, like saying, well, if you're depressed, or you have a sort of cognitive, any sort of like cognitive difference, like you should just toughen up or drink some water, or like go to bed early, like there's just so many bad beliefs still around invisible disabilities. So even though my physical disability means I can't pass in public for even a moment without people sort of reflecting things back to me, I do enjoy like a certain privilege of just people also believing that I have something that's happening. And my husband has taught me so much about mental health, because he doesn't mind me talking about this. He, works through and experiences a lot of depression. And it was a really interesting, like, learning process for us in our marriage to talk across our very different experiences of what can be considered disability. Mine being very physical and his being very mental, and the ways in which we had some bad misconceptions about what, like, I did for him. I didn't really understand what depression was until he taught me so much, and he didn't really understand what my life was. So I think that one of the most important things within the disability community is recognizing that there aren't a lot of universals that we can put, we're not all feeling the same way, but we all hopefully can look at like bridging that gap through communicating the sort of specificity of our experiences within that big disabled umbrella.
I totally want to ask you all these tactical questions about the book, like how you put this book together, but I will bother you about some of those questions in person. So to go back to themes, one thing that I was so moved by was your reading about your experience of motherhood. And I know that we are both here for all the ambivalence and the terror, but I want to say that your book also contains some of the most beautiful passages about maternal love that I've ever read, and puts into words like a lot of the joy and wonder that I mean, I really struggle with getting that down on paper. So I really admired that aspect among the many of things about your book that I love. So I wanted to ask, how has writing this book changed your experience of motherhood? Because a lot of it is about staying present and being present for the day-to-day and the mundane, and like finding beauty in the mundane. And it's something that I really struggle with. So do you feel that there was a before and after in terms of the writing of the book and now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, to be clear, like I still have all those ambivalent feelings, and I still have all this, I still have all the struggle, and I'm still, I think it's really, I still believe, from the beginning to the end of the book, that it's really, really important, and that it's a liberating thing for women, especially, but for any parent, to remember that love, like the love you feel for your child, is such a big, big, vast thing. And it should be big and vast, because for me, it is the single biggest, most complex feeling I've ever felt in my life. And it doesn't do anyone any favors, especially not me, any favors, if the pressure on mothers is that they should just feel ecstatic all the time, that they should just feel like a simple and pure and constant, like unwavering love for their child, which I do feel, an incredibly powerful, stable, constant love for my son, the greatest love I've ever felt. But because that feeling is so huge and complex, alongside that love is fear and anxiety and worry and obligation and resentment sometimes, and just like, it's a big human emotion, which means I have a lot of different ways in which I'm processing it. And to me, the fact that I have all those feelings, I think maybe the big shift in the book is that at the beginning, I'm really thinking about the fact that I'm having all this fear and anxiety and seeing it as a deficit of mine. And by the end of the book, I'm seeing it as the thing that makes that feeling of love that I have for him more powerful, because it isn't just this perfect, easy thing that just occurred. It's actually a very earned thing. And it's an earned thing that happens every single day, where I'm looking at all the things I need to do and all the ways in which I need to show up for him. And that those things are daily, it's daily work, but that he is worth putting that effort into, and that makes the weight of the love that I feel for him so much more real and powerful. Like we just got a puppy who I love very much, but like the puppy's very easy to love, which doesn't make me love her less, but she's just cute, and she just like sleeps, and like she's just so, like, my love for her is actually quite simple and pure and very real. But like, it's not, it's like your kid, it's like, that's so powerful, because it pushes into like the dark corners of your psyche, and it pushes you to be a better person, and it makes you cry, and it makes you feel terror. And that's the thing that tells me that this love, no disrespect to my puppy, but like that love is the love of my life with my child. So I think that also the contemplation of beauty, like spending so much time in the contemplation of beauty, is a thing that's really helped me love the mundane and the everyday moments of beauty. So at the beginning of the book, I'm really only thinking about beauty in sort of its highest, most sort of, like high art forms, right? So the beginning of the book finds me looking at Bernini sculptures in Rome, and really contemplating what great sculptors over time have been able to make. And the end of the book is, the very end of the book is me writing, hopefully with the same reverence and the same awe, about walking my son home from school and listening to my husband make me coffee in the morning. And so I think the thing that allows me to write with that reverence and awe about the mundane by the end of the book is just sitting in the contemplation of beauty and the things in the narratives that form my ideas about beauty. And by doing that, I can sort of take stock of why I've chosen certain types of beauty to be more relevant to me or more important or higher priorities than others. So why is it that I think a great work of literature means more than looking at my son's like, you know, eyelashes in the sun, which is like so fast, just to like stare at his eyelashes that are growing like every second, it feels like. And just, I think just being able to think about that for so long has given me some control over what I choose to really appreciate.
I'm going to throw a perhaps unanswerable question at you. Have you thought about what concept of beauty you hope to pass to your son, both his understanding of beauty in the world and like how the world sees him?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have this passage at the end of the book where I'm walking with him, and I sort of acknowledge that what I really think is important with beauty is to be able to grasp it and see it and pull it from, I think I say something like, the challenge is to isolate the salient thing, right? In the muck. So to be able to pull out in the sort of disorder and chaos of our lives, the most salient thing, the most important thing, because beauty is occurring all around us all the time, but we're often very distracted by, again, like as Iris Murdoch says, our fat, relentless ego, or like Twitter, or like my Times review coming out next week, which I'm putting too much worry and thought about.
Oh, I'm so excited.
We'll see. And like, you know, or like logistics or whatever. And it's like, it's so easy to not focus the mind on the salient thing, to pluck that out of the texture, the wild texture of our lives. And I think the thing that and then the other side of that is like, you can pull that salient thing out, but you can't fossilize it. And that's another thing I always want to do in the book is I want to take experiences of beauty and like fossilize it and kind of drag it back into my neutral room, sort of cave in my mind and try to just like control it and hold it. But by the end of the book, I'm just trying to see it and experience it and let it go. And I think that's part of why being really in the present is such a hard and painful thing, because it means that you are showing up fully for the possibility of beauty and meaning, but you can't keep it forever. You have to let it go. So the thing I want for Wolf is for him to feel some sort of ease, much more ease than I did, looking for those things and also letting them go. You know, you see a sunset and it's got to go. It's going to fade. And, you know, all the sort of things that we admire, they're eventually going to fade. And my fear of losing those things could keep me from even experiencing them at all. So my hope is that my son is a little smarter and better at that. And that he also doesn't let, again, this is like part of the pulling the salient thing, he doesn't let the possibility of ugliness or cruelty also block him from the experience of beauty, which is definitely something I did, you know, just so worried about other people's opinions or what they were reflecting back to me that I would miss out on the salient thing, which was quite often just being in the present with the people that I loved.
I'm just going to remind the audience that we have about 15 minutes left, so feel free to leave your questions in the chat. Until then, I'm just going to keep asking you questions. One of them is that
there's one question from an Allison. Did you see that?
Yes, there's one from Allison. I can throw that to you now. It says, your mother was protective and practical, and encouraged you to use your disability as a tool. And can you talk about what that meant?
Yeah, I think that's a thing I didn't understand till I had a kid. It's like my mother's in the book, she says, you know, we experienced something as a kid where someone's not all that kind to me. And she says, just play your card when you've got it. And what she meant by that was, she was like, it's really important for you to have an understanding of what people see and how they're going to have limited expectations, and use that to manipulate them. And the thing is like, I really understand why she said that, because as a mother, you just want to protect your one child and you want to keep them safe. And to be honest, there's nothing I wouldn't tell Wolfgang to do to keep him safe. And I now see her advice as like so painful for her to have to give me that advice, to say, really look at the worst things that people are going to think and internalize those to a certain extent so that you can protect yourself against them. And I think she's absolutely right. But at the same time, the way that and this is not on her, this is 100% on me, the way that I took that advice was sometimes to, again, like have preconceived notions of how people were going to treat me and lean into those things to manipulate them or to get the thing that I wanted. So there's a scene where I'm, kind of manipulating a security guard in order to get into a VIP section at a Beyonce concert, which is great, but in order to do that, I had to sort of lean into this infantilizing like mode in which he was speaking to me, where he was like, oh, she's just confused and she doesn't know where she is, this poor little, weirdo, I don't know. And I was like, good, give me that. Yes, like I can take your discomfort and your infantilizing beliefs and use it to get what I want. And I did, and that was great. But the sort of realization that I have is that every single time I do that, I'm complicit in the continuation of those bad beliefs. And I'm complicit in the possibility that those beliefs will continue and be put on another body like mine. And so I think this idea of like my mom's idea of like playing your card, it's such a complex idea, because on one hand, you do need to know how the world sees you and to protect yourself. But on the other hand, you don't want to feed into the worst things that people can think of you and to reinforce that narrative. So it's something in the book that I turn over and over and over again. And then also when I become a parent, I have a brand new sort of perception of it, because I do want to give Wolf sometimes really bad advice that would just keep him safe. And that's a hard line as a parent to stay on the right side of.
So on the subject of your mom, one effect of reading your book is that I really want to meet your family. So I'm sad that your mom is not coming to Chicago too, but I really found her and Andrew to be like some of the stars of the book too. And
Totally.
publishing a memoir is just a really different project than publishing fiction. So I'd love to hear your experience navigating that, because you are taking like a lot of private stories and private experiences and making them public. And what's your experience been like navigating that with people who seem like they might be pretty private in real life?
Oh, absolutely. My mom is like horrifically private. So this is sort of a nightmare for her. And I would also do this mean thing where I would be talking to her, we'd be having long conversations, and then like, my phone would beep or something, and she would see that I was recording her, and she would go, "What's that?" And I go, "Oh yeah, I'm recording this, by the way." And she'd be like, "You're supposed to tell people before you record," but I knew if I told her that I was recording her. So see, I'm manipulating her. I'm playing my card against her, but she's not mad. She's not mad. But yeah, it was a really difficult thing, but I think she and my husband both really believed in this project. I think one of the trickier things too is you're not telling anybody's whole story, right? Memoir is not, it's not a 6-volume autobiography in which I'm going to tell you every single detail of my life and every character is going to be fleshed out in its entirety. Like memoir, to me, the best memoirs are really about ideas and they're not about people. So they're much more focused on a person having something that they want to communicate, a truth, right? Or an idea or a question or a problem about what it means to be human. And then they're just trying to share a little bit of their experience navigating that question. So for me, I think the central question of this book is, how do you stay on the right side of that threshold when it comes to the desire to retreat from the world versus the knowledge that you need to be, or you should consider trying to be more present? And to be present means integrating the hard facts of reality into that sort of romantic, retreated, idealized space. And I struggle with that so intensely. And throughout the whole book, that's a big struggle. Do I live in a world of others? Am I present for a world of others? Or do I stand on the outside of life? Or do I stand in the margins and allow that retreated space to sort of take over my life. And throughout the book, I'm just constantly toggling between those spaces. So when I'm writing about my mother, I'm very much writing about the part of her that grounds me in reality. And when I'm writing about my father, I'm very much writing about the part of him that abstracts me into this more sort of idealized and retreated mental space. And it's the same when I'm writing about Wolfgang and Andrew. So I think one of the hard things is that the people in my life have to know that I'm only bringing them in to the extent that it serves this point that I'm trying, or this question that I'm trying to answer, which means you're not getting every biographical detail. You're not getting all the sides of these profoundly multifaceted people, because I would need 6 more books for that. And I think that can be a hard thing, you know, like if you're your character in someone else's book, to know that they're not telling your story. They're telling the part of you that influences or drives this question. I'm lucky that, you know, I just got to have a lot of really honest conversations with my family, and they supported it, but it is a really hard thing to do, for sure.
I'm going to skip back to a question I had earlier because you've given me an intro for it, which is I was really impressed by how seamlessly you weave together your intellectual questions with family history, with personal history, with the movement through time and across the world. And would you say that, like, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what were some of your organizing principles in putting the book together? Because to me, like, it feels like this perfect construction, but I'm sure I'm not seeing the hard stuff along the way.
Yeah, I mean, so the book, you just mean like structure wise and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, when you went, I'm assuming it was not written like from start to finish and then revised over and over again. So did you have a sense of like, I'm going to use this trip to ground this inquiry, and like, how much was it planned and how much did it just emerge?
Well, it's really like 2 layers. One is totally spontaneous, and then the planned layer. I think I said this earlier, like I had no intention of this, maybe I didn't say it, but I had no intention of this being public. I'd started this as a private project for myself to try to be better for my child. And I was traveling a lot for different journalism projects and also for dissertation research. And I had made this sort of plan with myself to, while I was traveling, to just no longer act as if my body wasn't there, which is something I was really capable of doing, to not pretend that I wasn't disabled, and to instead really focus my mind on what it felt like to be my body out in the world, which also meant paying really close attention to things that people were saying or doing, interactions that I was having with strangers, conversations I was having. And again, like this idea of, you know, I think the real organizing principle being this Murdoch idea of looking at beauty. So in each one of the chapters, I'm in a different city across the globe, trying to think about the impact that beauty or art or the aesthetic experience can have on a person. And I process that through, again, like a Bernini sculpture, a Beyonce concert, a Verdi opera, a Roger Federer at Indian Wells playing tennis, Peter Dinklage at a film festival. So in a lot of, you know, just as many art forms and then also the natural world too, when I'm in Lake Como. And the process of writing what became like the first draft was, I was just like writing down my ideas, and I was allowing my consciousness to really process organically these problems. So when I looked at my journals from these trips, they were just moving back and forth in time. I was going, oh, well, you know, I was on this boat and I was looking at this thing, and then it reminded me of this thing from my childhood, or this thing that this person said to me. But then I was also doing a PhD in philosophy, so I was reading a lot of theory and going, oh, this thing that happened reminds me of this thing that Elaine Scarry wrote about, or that Kant wrote about. You know, I think everybody, when they see Roger Federer play tennis, thinks of Kant, obviously. So I was like, those 2 things go together. But I was just writing those things organically and like really letting my mind make connections genuinely on the page. And then I published that believer essay and people responded to that and were okay with that movement. But then of course you can't just publish your diaries, right? Like nobody actually cares about like your little thoughts. So one of the most amazing things was just working with Lauren Ween, who really gave me a lot, like just such a collaborative space and a lot of feedback for translating sort of the authentic consciousness processing a problem in a lot of different ways, and then making sure that that really fit a strong structure that was communicating to an anonymous reader. So I guess part of the long answer is like that structure is really built in deep conversation and collaboration with, I think, you know, one of the best editors ever to have ever lived, and that's Lauren Ween. So
I'm sure Lauren will appreciate that shout out. I'm just going to slip in one more question because I'm personally very curious. What is at the top of your TBR pile?
So I just read, and I'm doing an event with this writer in a couple days, The Coward by Jared McGinnis, which is a fantastic and very, very funny novel. And then Disorientation, this novel that just came out, I'm like really excited about. I haven't read that yet, but it's like very, very, have you read that?
I have a copy, but I think it's going to really speak to you because it's about academia too.
I know, I'm so excited. That's like really high. And then I also just started, but haven't finished this yet, this book called Daily Activities for Daily Living. And I think it comes out on Tuesday, if I'm not wrong. So I'm really excited about those novels. And then whatever you write next, you're going to send me and not make me wait till it comes out.
You're too kind. Well, I'm excited for us to leap into the reading each other's drafts phase of friendship too.
Oh yeah, that's next.
Well, thank you guys so much. I was so hesitant to pop up on the screen because I was so riveted by the conversation, and you guys have such a lovely connection. It's great to have people on who are friends and so respect each other, because you really pick up on that and it makes the conversation that much deeper. So thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. This is a fascinating conversation. I loved it. I want to say, please purchase this book. Book Passage has copies. You can buy them online. You can come into our bookstore. We are open at both our locations in San Francisco and Corte Madera. You can call us and have one sent to you. But do buy this book. It is beautiful and it will change the way you see things. It really, there were so many things in here that when I read it, I haven't finished it. I'm sort of savoring it, but that I just thought, well, I can't believe people haven't talked about this before, and what a lovely thing to share with us. So thank you so much. And on behalf of Book Passage, thank you to our viewers. And I can't wait to see what you guys do next. And hopefully you'll be able to join us in person at Book Passage. And so everybody stay safe, have a wonderful week, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
you.